Listen, lady, I'm a man. I can do anything you can do, except conceive.
If I do say so myself, you are fantastic.
I'm fantastic.
Before streaming, TV was a wild west of gloriously unhinged sitcoms. We're digging up the bizarre, forgotten, and delightfully misguided shows from the 70s and 80s that flickered onto your screen and then vanished. Ready to question your own memories? Let's get weird. 1. Small Wonder.
Say hello to my family.
Hello to my family.
A robotics engineer, Ted Lawson, creates a child android named Vicky Short for voice input child identicant. Instead of selling this world-changing invention for billions, he brings her home to live with his family, passing her off as their adopted daughter just to see if she can learn to be normal. It was a show that asked the question nobody was asking. What if our daughter was a VCR with pigtails and super strength? The Lawson family, Ted, his wife Joan, and their son Jamie, spent every episode in a state of low-grade panic, trying to hide Vicky's secret from their unbelievably nosy neighbors, the Brindles. The comedy was supposed to come from Vicky, taking everything literally, speaking in a deadpan monotone, and occasionally lifting the sofa to vacuum under it. From the outside, it seemed simple, until you dig deeper. There was something genuinely unsettling about Vicky, played with an unnerving stillness by Tiffany Brissett. With her frilly dresses, unchanging expression, and the secret access panel in her back, she walked the terrifying line between charmingly quirky and the star of your next nightmare. The show felt like a live-action version of a toy you'd find at a discount store. Brightly colored, a little bit off, and probably made with questionable materials. Here's the crazy part. Small Wonder wasn't a one-season flop. Despite being roasted by critics, it was a syndicated workhorse that ran for a mind-boggling 4 seasons and 96 episodes. Its secret weapon was the after-school time slot. It became a babysitter for a generation of latchkey kids who were home alone, unwrapping a fruit roll-up, and just happy to have something on TV that wasn't a soap opera. It wasn't a hit in the traditional sense, it was a fixture, a weirdly reliable part of the 80s afternoon routine. Second Sledgehammer.
Hammer, don't you read the papers?
No, I prefer to get my information from more reliable sources like rumor and small children.
In a world of cool, slick 80s cops, Inspector Sledgehammer was a stick of dynamite in a china shop. A walking, talking parody of every tough guy cliché from Dirty Harry to Rambo. He was a man who solved every problem with absurd levels of violence and had deeply personal conversations with his .44 Magnum, which he named Sledge. His motto was, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." He almost never did. Paired with his intelligent and perpetually horrified partner, Detective Dory Durow, Sledge spent his days blowing up buildings to catch a jaywalker and delivering terrible puns with a completely straight face. The show was a brilliant, ahead-of-its-time satire of the action genre that was dominating the decade. It was created by Alan Spencer, who was a comedy prodigy, but it aired on a network that had absolutely no idea what to do with such a high-concept spoof. The show's ratings were abysmal. Here's where it all takes a sharp turn. Believing their cancellation was inevitable, Spencer and the writers decided to go out with a bang, literally. The Season 1 finale ended with Sledge accidentally detonating a nuclear warhead and wiping out the entire city. It was the ultimate middle finger to the network. And then something totally unexpected happened. The show was miraculously renewed for a second season. Nonplussed, the creators simply put a title card at the beginning of the Season 2 premiere that read, "The following season is set 5 years before the bomb." 3. It's a Living.
Now, girls, I've noticed that lately a few of you have been putting on a little weight.
Perhaps if you'd let us wear clothes instead of a rubber band, you might not notice it.
A classic workplace sitcom centered on a group of waitresses working at a fancy high-end restaurant called Above the Top, located on the top floor of a Los Angeles skyscraper. The show followed their friendships, their dating lives, and their daily struggles with demanding customers and a sarcastic piano player named Sonny. With its cast of distinct personalities, the naive one, the sassy one, the sophisticated one, it was pure comfort food television. It was the kind of show you'd watch on a weeknight when you didn't want to think too hard. It had all the hallmarks of an 80s sitcom: big hair, polyester uniforms with ridiculously puffy sleeves, and plots about trying to get a celebrity's autograph. It ran on ABC for 2 seasons, with a cast that included a post-soap Ann Jillian. The ratings were mediocre, and ABC canceled it in 1982. For most shows, that would be the end of the story. And right when it seemed like the end, that's when the real story started. In a move that almost never happens, the show was resurrected 3 years later for first-run syndication. With a slightly retooled cast and a lower budget, it went on to run for 4 more seasons, becoming a quiet but resilient hit. It's the ultimate underdog story of a show that simply refused to die. Fourth, Mr. Belvedere.
AIDS thing you told us about. Do you know what that is?
Sure. I mean, it's real bad, and you get in real bad trouble if you get caught with it. Sort of like shoplifting.
An incredibly posh and brilliant English butler, Lynn Belvedere, who has served the likes of Winston Churchill, takes a job as a live-in housekeeper for a loud, chaotic, middle-class American family, the Owens, in the suburbs of Pittsburgh. His reason? He was doing research on suburban American life for a novel. The show was a classic culture clash comedy. Mr. Belvedere, played with perfect stuffiness by Christopher Hewitt, was the voice of reason and sophistication amidst the Owens family's very American brand of chaos. There was the sports writer Dad George, the law student mom Marcia, and their 3 kids, including the mischievous youngest, Wesley, who was Belvedere's primary antagonist. The show had a gentle, predictable rhythm, with every episode ending with Mr. Belvedere writing in his journal, delivering a pithy, moralistic summary of the day's lesson with the smug satisfaction of a man who knows he's the only one in the house who knows how to use a fish fork. The show was a solid part of ABC's popular TGIF lineup, but its legacy took a bizarre turn. From the outside, it seemed simple, until you dig deeper. The show became infamous for a strange behind-the-scenes urban legend involving the actor who played Wesley, Bryce Beckham. The story, which became a running joke on late-night TV for years, is too weird to detail here, but it has forever linked the show's memory with a piece of bizarre, almost unbelievable Hollywood gossip rather than its on-screen family wholesomeness. 5. Jennifer Slept Here.
My name is Jennifer Farrell, and this is my house.
Jennifer Farrell died 5 years ago.
I know. I'm a ghost.
A glamorous bombshell movie star from the golden age of Hollywood, Jennifer Farrell tragically dies. Her ghost then decides to haunt her old Beverly Hills mansion. It was basically the ghost in Mrs. Muir if Mrs. Muir was a gawky teenage boy from New York. The show starred the effervescent Ann Jillian as Jennifer. A new family, the Elliots, moves into her house, and for reasons never explained by the laws of the paranormal, only the nebbish teenage son, Joey, can see and hear her. This set up the entire gimmick of the show. Jennifer, the wisecracking ghost, would use her limited powers walking through walls, making objects float. To help Joey with his very 80s teenage problems, like dealing with bullies and trying to ask out the head cheerleader. It was harmless, fluffy, and completely built around Ann Jillian's persona. It all boils down to this one twist. Only Joey could see her. This meant that for 90% of every episode, the rest of the cast just thought their son was talking to himself like a complete weirdo. The premise was a creative dead end. How many times can you watch a kid have a conversation with an empty chair before it gets old? The answer, it turns out, is about 13 episodes. The show was canceled after a single season, vanishing into the ectoplasmic ether of failed high-concept sitcoms. 6. The Ropers.
Here, take a whiff. Doesn't that make you want to tear off my clothes?
No, it makes me wish we had separate bathrooms.
Remember Stanley and Helen Roper, the perpetually bickering, intimately frustrated landlords from the smash hit sitcom Three's Company? Well, some network executive, in a moment of questionable genius, decided they needed their own show. They sell their apartment building and move to the ritzy, upscale Cheviot Hills neighborhood. The Ropers were the perfect foils on Three's Company. They were the disapproving older generation reacting to the antics of their young, swinging tenants. On their own, their act wore thin. The entire premise of the new show was their working-class sensibilities clashing with their snobby new neighbor, Jeffrey P. Brooks III, played with delightful condescension by Jeffrey Tambor. The core comedy, however, was the exact same as it ever was. Stanley is cheap and wants to be left alone. Helen is desperate for affection and makes sarcastic remarks. It was the television equivalent of watching your parents try to hang out with your friends after you've left for college, awkward and a little sad. It was supposed to be easy, until it wasn't. Spinning off two beloved characters from one of the biggest shows on TV seemed like a guaranteed hit. And at first, it was. But audiences quickly realized that without Jack, Janet, and Chrissy to play off of, the Ropers' one-note bickering wasn't enough to sustain a series. The show was canceled after 2 seasons, and in a final, sad twist, the characters were written out of the Three's Company universe, with Mr. Roper being killed off-screen years later. 7. Bosom Buddies.
Don't make me take you down, guy.
You can't take me down.
I'm bigger than you are.
Yeah, make your move, big guy.
You first.
2 young, struggling ad men, Kip and Henry, have their apartment demolished. The only place they can find that they can afford is a room at the Susan B. Anthony Hotel. The catch? It's for women only. Their logical solution, don wigs, dresses, and pantyhose to become Buffy and Hildegard. This was Some Like It Hot for the Reagan era, a classic sitcom built on a high-concept gimmick. The show followed Kip and Henry's frantic attempts to maintain their dual identities, fending off the advances of their male coworkers while trying to woo their female neighbors without revealing that they were actually the 2 guys from down the hall. It was goofy, it was broad, and it had a theme song by Billy Joel My Life that was way cooler than the show itself. The chemistry between the 2 leads, Peter Scolari and a very young Tom Hanks, was undeniable. The show never found a large audience and was canceled after just 2 seasons. But its legacy is gigantic. The wild part is, this silly, forgettable sitcom about 2 guys in drag is now remembered almost exclusively as the launching pad for one of the most beloved and acclaimed actors of all time, Tom Hanks. Before he was winning Oscars for Philadelphia and Forrest Gump, before he was America's Dad, he was putting on a wig and calling himself Buffy so he could save a few bucks on rent. It's a bizarre, hilarious footnote in an incredible career. 8. Mr. Merlin.
The Merlin? You have to be over 1,600 years old.
I do 30 push-ups a day and I don't eat fried food.
The legendary wizard Merlin from the age of King Arthur is still alive and now living in modern-day San Francisco, running an auto repair shop under the name Max Merlin. He's getting tired and needs to pass on his magical legacy to an apprentice. Merlin, played with wonderful crotchety charm by veteran actor Barnard Hughes, finds his successor in Zach, a completely average, slightly goofy teenager. The show was basically The Sorcerer's Apprentice meets a high school comedy. Each week, Zach would face a mundane teenage problem, a bully, a crush, a final exam, and try to solve it with a spell he wasn't ready for. The magic would inevitably backfire in a comical way, like turning his history teacher into a frog. And Merlin would have to step in, roll his eyes, and clean up the mess with a sigh of immortal exasperation. It was a cute, harmless show, but it suffered from a repetitive formula. It fell into the same trap as many magical sitcoms. The premise was the whole show. After 22 episodes, it was clear there wasn't much more to do with the concept, and it was canceled. But nobody saw this coming. The young actor who played the bumbling apprentice, Jonathan Prince, would go on to have a very successful career behind the camera as a television director and producer, working on hit shows like Blossom and American Dreams. Clearly, he learned a thing or two about making TV magic, even if his on-screen character never quite did. 9. My Sister Sam.
Brandon asked you out on a date? Yeah. Sam, that's hysterical. It is?
Samantha Sam Russell is a successful 29-year-old freelance photographer with a perfectly organized life and a chic San Francisco apartment. Her world is thrown into chaos when her bubbly, free-spirited 16-year-old sister, Patty, lands on her doorstep to live with her. It was a classic odd couple sitcom, the uptight older sister and the messy but lovable younger one. Riding high on the fame of its star, Pam Dauber from Mork and Mindy, the show was an immediate hit for CBS. It was a charming, well-written sitcom that captured the hearts of audiences. The chemistry between Dauber and the effervescent young actress who played Patty, Rebecca Schaeffer, was the heart and soul of the series. It was a warm, funny show about sisterhood and growing up. The show's ratings declined in its second season, and it was canceled. But the show's story doesn't end there. Things looked normal until they weren't. In 1989, a year after the show ended, Rebecca Schaeffer was tragically murdered at her home by an obsessed fan who had been stalking her. The horrific and senseless crime sent shockwaves through Hollywood and the nation. The show's lighthearted legacy was forever eclipsed by this dark, real-life tragedy, which ultimately led to the passage of the first anti-stalking laws in the United States. 10th Square Pegs.
5 will get you 10. They call him Dingleberry.
Yo, hey, Dingleberry!
Two awkward but intelligent freshman girls, Patty and Lauren, are on a desperate, all-consuming mission to finally become popular. The show was a painfully accurate, witty, and often poignant look at the brutal social hierarchy of Wee High School. This wasn't your typical goofy high school sitcom. Created by former Saturday Night Live writer Ann Beats, Square Pegs was sharp, funny, and felt real. It captured the feeling of being an outsider with excruciating perfection. Patty was the cynical, smart one in glasses. Lauren was the bubbly wannabe social climber with braces. They were surrounded by a pitch-perfect cast of high school archetypes: the preppies, the new wavers, the nerds, and the valley girls. It was a critical darling, praised for its smart dialogue and for featuring one of the first major roles for a young Sarah Jessica Parker as Patty. 11. Double Trouble.
You show me the signal for a right-hand turn. See? You're wrong, too. It's this.
Because the 80s were apparently contractually obligated to produce sitcoms about twins, we got Double Trouble. The show starred real-life twin sisters, Jean and Liz Segal, as Kate and Allison Foster, identical twins with opposite personalities. Kate was the serious, responsible one. Allison was the wild, fun-loving troublemaker. The show was pure sitcom fluff, a flimsy premise designed solely to capitalize on the twin gimmick that was popular in commercials for Wrigley's Gum and Lipton iced tea. In the first season, the twins lived with their widowed dad in Des Moines, Iowa, where they ran his dance studio. The plots were predictable, usually involving a case of mistaken identity that could have been solved with a 30-second conversation. The show was not a hit. Just when it all seemed figured out, everything changed in one moment. In a desperate attempt to save the series for a second season, the network performed a drastic retooling. The dad was written out, and the twins were suddenly shipped off to New York City to live with their eccentric aunt, played by Barbara Barry, and pursue glamorous careers in fashion and acting. The change of scenery didn't help. The show was still built on a weak foundation, and it was canceled, leaving it as a minor footnote in the decade's obsession with symmetrical siblings. 12. She's the Sheriff.
Hey, how do you know all this? I mean, you were never anybody's boss.
Oh, no? I was married to your father for 45 years.
After her sheriff husband dies unexpectedly, Hildy Granger, a mother of two with absolutely no law enforcement experience, is appointed to finish his term as the sheriff of a small town in Nevada, because that's how civic appointments work, apparently. This syndicated sitcom was a star vehicle for Suzanne Summers, who was still riding high on her Post-Three's Company fame and her new career as a Thighmaster guru. The show's comedy was derived from two simple sources: Hildy's common sense, woman's intuition approach to police work, and the cartoonish incompetence of her all-male staff of deputies, who were convinced she couldn't handle the job. It was a flimsy premise that felt like it was written on the back of a cocktail napkin. At first, it looked harmless, but the show was critically savaged from the moment it premiered. It quickly gained a reputation as one of the worst sitcoms of the era, a prime example of lazy, hackneyed writing and a premise that went nowhere. It became a punchline, a symbol of bad syndicated television that filled late-night time slots. Its failure wasn't a surprising twist. It was a slow, predictable slide into obscurity, remembered today only by connoisseurs of truly terrible TV. 13. Check it out.
What other channels can you get?
Well, one camera covers the produce, one camera covers the meat.
I was just doing a little joke.
Oh, you were? When was that?
Don Adams, the legendary Maxwell Smart from Get Smart, returned to television as Howard Bannister, the long-suffering manager of a chaotic supermarket named Cobb's. It was essentially Are You Being Served?, but with shopping carts and a sale on canned peas. The store was staffed by a crew of sitcom archetypes: the ditzy cashier, the ambitious but dim-witted assistant manager, and a militant senior citizen stockboy. Howard's main job was to act as the exasperated eye of the storm, trying to maintain a semblance of order amidst the daily chaos caused by his staff and customers. It was a Canadian production that was imported for American audiences, which already gave it a slightly off feel. What people miss is this key detail. Don Adams was a comedy genius, but the role of Howard Bannister was a creative straitjacket. Audiences who tuned in expecting the bumbling, confident idiocy of Maxwell Smart were met with a tired-looking man playing the straight man. He was forced to react to the silliness around him rather than create it himself. The show never felt like a good fit for his unique talents, and while it ran for 3 seasons in syndication, it made virtually no cultural impact. The show was based on a British sitcom called Tripper's Day. This practice of adapting British comedies for North American audiences was a time-honored tradition, resulting in massive hits All in the Family, Sanford and Son, and Spectacular Failures, Coupling. Check It Out falls somewhere in the forgettable middle. 14. Holmes and Yo-Yo.
Thanks, Alex. I enjoyed it very much. It took you 2 seconds to read a 300-page report? Well, I'm a little out of practice.
In a premise that sounds like it was generated by a malfunctioning computer, the LAPD decides the best way to reduce officer injuries is to create a robot cop. The result is Yo-Yo, an android who is partnered with a very human, very exasperated detective named Alexander Holmes. Yo-Yo, played by John Schuck inside a stiff suit, was programmed with every police manual ever written, but possessed zero common sense. He was a walking, talking disaster. He took everything literally, was prone to bizarre malfunctions, like compulsively taking a picture every time he heard the word cheese, and generally caused more problems than he solved. His partner Holmes's main job was to keep Yo-Yo's robotic nature a secret from the public, which was difficult when Yo-Yo was trying to arrest a fire hydrant for loitering. The show was a bizarre hybrid of a police procedural and a sci-fi comedy that failed at both. The jokes were painfully corny and predictable. The deeper you look, the stranger it gets. This legendary flop wasn't made by amateurs. It was created by Leonard Stern, a veteran producer and writer who had a hand in certified classics like The Honeymooners and Get Smart. The fact that a comedy genius could produce something so spectacularly bad is a testament to the fact that in Hollywood, no one is immune to a terrible idea. It was canceled after 13 episodes. The sound effects for Yo-Yo's movements were the classic clunky whirring and buzzing sounds that were Hollywood's go-to for any robot in the 70s, making him sound less like a sophisticated android and more like a broken dishwasher. 15th Carter Country.
I want to know everything that went on. I mean, any unusual noises. I mean anything. If a tomcat got lucky that night, I want to know about it.
A classic fish-out-of-water story set in the Deep South. Sergeant Curtis Baker is a sharp, educated black police officer from New York City who gets transferred to the small, sleepy town of Clinton Corners, Georgia, right in the heart of President Jimmy Carter's home state. There, Sergeant Baker had to work with a bumbling, well-meaning, but hopelessly old-fashioned white police chief Roy Moby. The comedy was derived from the clash of cultures, the big city way versus the small town way, and the show was praised at the time for tackling racial issues with a light comedic touch. It was a gentle, character-driven show that felt very much a product of its specific time. The show was a moderate success, but its biggest strength was also its fatal flaw. Nobody saw this coming, but its entire identity was tied to the Carter presidency. Once Jimmy Carter was voted out of office in 1980 and the Reagan era began, the show's cultural relevancy evaporated almost overnight. It felt like a relic of a bygone era. Compared to the groundbreaking, sharp-edged social commentary of Norman Lear's shows like All in the Family and The Jeffersons, Carter Country was a much tamer, safer alternative that ultimately didn't have the same staying power. Chief Roy Moby was played by veteran character actor Victor French, who would find much greater and more lasting fame just a few years later as the lovable mountain man Isaiah Edwards on Little House on the Prairie, and as Michael Landon's co-star on Highway to Heaven. 16. The Greatest American Hero. A high school teacher is given a superpowered suit by aliens, but he immediately loses the instruction manual. As a result, he can barely control his powers, crashing when he tries to fly and generally fumbling his way through saving the day. He flew with all the grace of a tossed salad, crashing into buildings and screaming in terror the whole time. He'd activate his powers by accident, often with disastrous results. He was less of a man of steel and more of a man of stumbling into things. He was aided by a grizzled, old-school FBI agent, Bill Maxwell, who was constantly frustrated by Ralph's incompetence, but knew he was their only hope. The show was a wonderful, hilarious deconstruction of the superhero mythos. The show was a beloved cult classic, but it was never a massive ratings blockbuster. The wild part is the show's theme song, Believe It or Not, sung by Joey Scarberry, became a colossal hit single, reaching number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in 1981. The song is arguably far more famous and has had a much longer life than the show it came from. It's a rare case where the theme song completely eclipsed its source material, a perfect piece of early 80s soft rock that almost everyone recognizes, even if they have no idea it was for a show about a superhero who couldn't fly straight. After the attempted assassination of President Ronald Reagan by John Hinckley Jr. in 1981, the producers, fearing the shared last name, changed the main character's name from Ralph Hinckley to Ralph Hanley for several episodes. 17. When the Whistle Blows.
Let's go, girls. Quick, quick, quick. Let's show Mr. Hammerman how appreciative we are for letting us use his construction site. It's Hammerhand, Ted.
A sitcom about the lives, loves, and on-the-job shenanigans of a group of blue-collar construction workers in Southern California. It was an attempt to capture the regular guy humor of a show like Cheers, but set on a dusty construction site instead of a cozy bar. The show was created by the legendary production team of Leonard Goldberg and Aaron Spelling, a duo responsible for dozens of massive hits like Charlie's Angels, Heart to Heart, and Fantasy Island. With that kind of pedigree, it seemed like a sure thing. The cast was filled with solid that guy, character actors, and the premise, while a bit bland, seemed workable. Here's where it all takes a sharp turn. ABC network executives reportedly hated the show before it even aired. In an infamous case of network interference, they forced the producers to completely reshoot the pilot and add a bizarre new element, a stunt of the week. In each episode, the construction workers would have to perform some kind of dangerous, death-defying feat. The result was a Frankenstein's monster of a show, part workplace comedy, part amateur stunt show, that made absolutely no sense. Critics and audiences were baffled, and it was yanked off the air after just a handful of episodes, becoming a textbook example of how network meddling can kill a show. The show's failure is a monumental testament to the fact that even the most successful producers in Hollywood history could still lay a colossal egg. 18th fish.
Where are you going?
Home.
You said you'd give it a chance.
I did. That's as much of a chance as I want to take.
This was a spin-off of the critically acclaimed sitcom Barney Miller, focusing on Detective Phil Fish, the perpetually grumpy, world-weary detective famous for his endless list of ailments and his constant need to use the bathroom. In this new series, Fish and his wife Bernice retire from the NYPD to run a group home for a diverse group of troubled foster kids. The idea was to take a beloved supporting character and build a new show around him. Abe Vigoda's portrayal of Fish was iconic. His deadpan delivery and hangdog expression were a highlight of every Barney Miller episode. The new show placed him in a chaotic family setting, making the man who complained about everything the full-time dad to 5 wisecracking juvenile delinquents. It was supposed to be easy until it wasn't. It turns out that a character who is hilarious in small, grumpy doses can become grating and depressing as the lead of a family show. Fish's constant complaining, which was the perfect spice in the ensemble of the 12th Precinct, just made him seem mean when directed at a group of foster kids. Abe Vigoda famously left a hit show for this spin-off only to see it canceled after a season and a half. In a sad final twist, he was never asked to return to Barney Miller, a move that reportedly stung him for years. 19. Angie.
Hi, Angie.
Hi.
I'm sorry I'm late.
Are you late? I didn't even notice the time.
A classic Cinderella story for the disco era. Angie Falco is a working-class coffee shop waitress in Philadelphia who has a meet-cute with a handsome, wealthy pediatrician named Brad Benson. They fall in love and get married in the very first episode. The show was produced by the legendary Gary Marshall, the man behind Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, and it starred Donna Pescow, who was hot off her star-making role in Saturday Night Fever. The sitcom focused on the culture clash as Angie adjusted to her new life of luxury, and her loud, blue-collar Italian-American family tried to deal with their new, ultra-rich in-law. The show was an instant, out-of-the-box smash hit for ABC, ranking as one of the top shows of the year. The show was on top of the world. You won't believe what came next. In its second season, the ratings completely collapsed. The show's entire premise, the will they or won't they make it culture clash, was essentially resolved the moment they said I do. The writers struggled to find new sources of conflict to keep audiences invested. It's a perfect example of a show with a fantastic pilot, but no long-term plan, a rocket that shot straight up and then immediately ran out of fuel. 20. Heil, honey, I'm home.
Okay. This is what we do. We get the Goldensteins tipsy so they fall asleep. Then we can bundle them back to their apartment. What could be simpler?
The dummy who thought of it.
This British sitcom was presented as a lost parody of a classic 1950s American sitcom, complete with a laugh track and black and white presentation. It featured a husband and wife living in a quiet suburban home who are constantly annoyed by their wacky new neighbors. A standard setup. The premise sounds harmless enough, but it all boils down to this one twist. The main characters were Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun, and their annoying new neighbors, the Goldensteins, were Jewish. Yes, you read that correctly. It was a sitcom where Adolf Hitler would walk through the door, give a half-hearted Nazi salute, and say, "Heil, honey, I'm home," to a wave of canned laughter. The central plot of the pilot involved Hitler trying to keep Neville Chamberlain from finding out about his Jewish neighbors. The show was intended as a savage satire on the vapidness of sitcoms and the normalization of evil. But that message was completely lost in the breathtakingly, monumentally offensive execution. You might think that's all, but wait, the real shocker was still to come. It actually aired. One single episode was broadcast in the UK. The public and critical backlash was so immediate, so overwhelming, and so full of pure horror that the remaining 7 completed episodes were permanently locked away in a vault, never to be seen again. It's not just a forgotten show. It was actively scrubbed from existence, earning its place in history as the undisputed champion of what were they possibly thinking? Television.